Welcome back to another episode of CT with E, Conscious Thinking with EddyEd, back with another video. We have a video of a young guy talking about his experience going through the trans that he went through. He was exposed to some things early on in his life that got him down a spiral going into his adulthood of how he became and how he transitioned. So we're going to look into his story of what made him revert back to his original self, and let's see what God has done into his life, because we know that the trans issue, it's a lot of different combinations that come with this, but the main root is deception. The enemy loves to deceive us, and that's one way we can outwardly see deception happening, making someone believe that there's something else when God created them one thing. And so we see that happening with the trans community, trans people. They have this war going on that they cannot see. But biblically, when we look at what's going on spiritually, we know that they're being attacked by the enemy and being influenced by different traumas that have happened possibly in their past. For some, not all. But let's go ahead and check and see what this guy's testimony is, and let's see if it can bless anybody listening.
It was amazing grace that saved a wretch like me. So before I even talk about the things that I got into and what happened to me that caused me to be in the state that I was in, people have to understand that I was lost, and now I'm found. It was greater than just I was a transgender. I like men. I was lost, but he found me. God delivered me about, I think it's been 12 years. July 15, 2012 was the day that God changed everything. I had an encounter with him that completely changed my life from the inside out. It was an inside work.
Inside job.
It was an inside job. And then it became an outward display. But growing up, I always, from a child, I always felt different. I grew up in church. My family raised me in church. I always actually loved God, believe it or not. I loved him. I sat on the front row and I used to watch the pastor preach, and I used to look at my dad sing in the choir and listen to people sing, and my heart would just be stirred watching this. And I wanted to be that. I just wanted to do that. I wanted to serve God. And I didn't even know what gay was. I didn't know what, any of that was. I just was being me. But early on, I felt like, because of the things that people said, I felt like something was wrong with me. So, it wasn't but a few years later that I ended up being sexually abused by a man. I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. I probably was about 7 or 8 years old, and I was at a friend's family's house, and literally he had pornography on the screen, and we walked in, and I remember feeling the darkness in the room and saying to myself, like, I probably shouldn't be here. because I had never been exposed to anything like that. It was church boy, I guess you would call it. And my family was, my mom and my dad, they just didn't have stuff like that in the house. So when I saw that on the TV screen, I remember thinking, this is not good and I probably shouldn't be here. But the guy was like, I need you to do what you see her doing. And he basically said, and I'm just practicing, for, when I get married. That's the reason.
That's what the guy said?
That's what the guy told me. He said, the reason why I'm asking you to do this, he said, is, it's just practice, but don't tell anybody. He was like, if you tell somebody, you're going to get in trouble because you shouldn't be doing this. So, there was manipulation there, fear there. And I remember doing it, and I think it was like performing oral sex at the time. And I remember thinking when we were done, I was like, oh my God, what just happened? And my friends, at the time was also having to do the same thing. And I remember walking home and feeling like, what in the world? Just knowing that something had shifted on the inside of me, something that I couldn't really explain, but it was almost like a piece of my innocence was gone. It was taken from me, and my world began to change. So I guess I probably was acting a little different, after that. And my mom would always ask, like, what's going on with you and stuff like that, but I didn't really know how to tell her. And then I seemed like I kept having these in regular encounters with this person, because every time I would come around them, they would, force me to do these things. And so it became like something that you just did. And as a young person, you can't really escape it, especially, if they're older than you and they're around you. And so you just kind of do it, and then it just began to become a lifestyle that I began to take on and practice and start to enjoy, because sex is enjoyable. I don't care what age you are, at some point you start to enjoy the feeling of it, and then you start attributing, like, maybe this is good this way. And the confusion was already there because of the bullying. The confusion was already there because of, the things that people were saying about me. So the enemy, I feel like, just used all of the rejection.
He watered the seeds.
He used he used that trauma. He used the things that people thought they were doing that was funny to them. He was using that to water the seed.
We see here that, what he's went through, the enemy began to use it and grow it in his life. And that's where the deception comes in. Whenever you have something dramatic happen to you, people want to say, oh, it must be God's will, or whatever they want to mix in there that is not supposed to be mixed. The enemy will trick you and will plant in your head, in your mind, as things are processing, this is how it's supposed to be. You should continue. Don't worry about what they're saying. They just jealous that you are, in this space and they're not in this space. So the enemy, we can see how the enemy begins to make his trick, because he is a deceiver. He's a liar. He's going to lie. He's going to lie to you so that he's going to lie to you in a way so that the lie is covered up in some truths and twisted to where you can't really identify. You might feel like something's off, but you can't really identify what the lie is or what the deception is. That's how good he is, because he's been doing this for a long time. And it's very subtle at times, or it might be, traumatic as this. But the point is, the enemy is behind, these type of influences. This doesn't come from the Lord. People always want to blame God for their tragedies. God doesn't set us up for failure. God doesn't set us up to be abused. But by his grace, if we do go through things like that, his grace is sufficient that it'll turn and work together for our good, meaning at the end, what God has originally designed for his children will still come to pass. So it'll build you. Now, I could imagine, I don't know what he's doing. Now I can imagine he may be helping other people who's gone through these type of traumas to be able to glorify God in that way. So these things that happen to us, God works. Let's go to a verse. Okay, we are in Romans 8, verse 28. And it says here, and we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. Let me read that one more time. And we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. And some of you may say, well, that sounds a little strange, but when you look at some of the biblical characters, when their lives have had some misfortune, some tragedy, some very traumatic things happening in their lives. For example, Joseph, his own brothers threw him into a pit, stole his garment that his dad gave him, and proclaimed that he died. But that was a lie. His story is a story of a tragedy that turned and worked for the good of his life, because God was using him for a purpose originally. But the enemy wanted to interfere, and the enemy used his brothers to take him down. But the Lord showed Joseph that he was indeed going to be in a place where God was going to use him for a particular purpose. And the brothers didn't like that. They allowed the enemy to use them, and they threw him away, and he was left for dead. But God used that situation and actually brought Joseph, and you got to go back and read it in the Old Testament, to where God used that situation to take Joseph where he was going to go anyway. So that's just one example upon many. So we see that the Lord isn't the author of confusion, the author of destruction of those who love him, but people around do make choices, and they could affect other people's lives. But guess what? Even though that may happen, God will use that for the good of those who love him. And so take that, marinate on that, or not marinate, think on it and meditate on it. That's what I meant to say. Meditate on it and really think about how God does this in our lives. And then look at the examples that we actually have in the scripture that really exalts the presence of God. So let's continue this video.
Was using that to hurt me deeper, to confuse me all the more. And it worked. It worked for a long time. I was now, confused about who I was. I was a little promiscuous, and then my mom, she found letters that I had wrote to somebody that I was talking to at school. I had to be in middle school at the time. And I remember I was laying on the couch and she dumped all the letters on top of me. Bro, I was so afraid. Because if you ever had a black mama, bruh, it's different.
Yeah.
And when she did it, I remember, I knew what the letters were. Why did I keep them? I was silly, but, but she opened them up and she laid them all on me. And she was like, what is this? What is this? Who are you? She was like, what have you done? What are you doing? And I was like frazzled. And I remember being like, I don't know. And nothing, this is nothing. And she was like, yes, it is. She was like, are you having sex? Are you gay? And I was like, no. And I started to lie because of the anger that was on her face and because of the emotions that I felt in that moment. I did not want her to look at me like that. So I immediately tried to cover it. I immediately tried to say it wasn't what it was, because I did not want to see that look in her eyes. And I know she was only reacting, which most parents do, which is a trap for your kids.
Explain that.
It's a trap for your kids, because when you're the person that God entrusted to love them and to love them well, to care for them, to teach them right from wrong, to be a safe place for them as they go through life, when you react out of fear, pain, any of that, what you end up doing is not creating a safe place, but you end up furthering the enemy's agenda, because you end up putting rejection on your child. Because out of your fear and out of your reacting so fast, you end up saying something that you probably shouldn't say. You end up doing something that you probably shouldn't do. And so I don't think it's wise for parents to react when they find out their child is doing that, because you're actually becoming a tool in the enemy's hand. Because in that moment, when a child is found out, or when they come clean, or whatever the case may be, they are looking and needing a safe place. They're looking and needing their mommy. They're needing their dad to listen to them, to love them, and to be slow to speak and walk with them through whatever it is that they need to walk with them through. And I know this because when my mom started to say the things that she said, and she said, if you're going to live like this, you know I didn't raise you like that. You know that we serve the Lord. She's saying all the right things, but she said, you're not my child. You can't live in this house acting like that, living that way. And she immediately began to reject me. And she said, if this is the life you're going to live, she was like, you're going to have to find another place to stay. Now, I'm young, but she was saying this because she was trying to scare me. Because she just didn't want me to be that. She loved me. She just was scared. She was hurting, and she didn't know how to process it yet. And in all of her attempts to deal with it, what it did was it just pushed me further and further, because I knew I couldn't come to her. I knew I couldn't share with her what was going on. I couldn't even process what was going on, because I did not want to see the look in her eyes that I saw that day. It's like I didn't even see my mom. I just saw somebody that was angry with me. And I was like, I don't know how this happened, Mom. I don't know why I'm doing this. I couldn't even say that because I wasn't given a chance to, but I felt that. And that's why if she had taken a moment, if parents take a moment to just try to help you process it, to help you deal with it in a way that I think that parents are supposed to do, then what you do is you create this distance. She didn't ask for that. She probably didn't want that, but her rejecting me and her saying those things to scare me or to make me know this wasn't right, it just made me hide. It made me begin to lie. And that's what happened for the next 2 weeks, man. She would just cook for me, and she would iron my clothes, and she would put the food on the table, but she wouldn't speak to me. She would iron my clothes and hang them up and tell me, this is what you're wearing tomorrow. But that was the extent of our conversation.
Wow. And that wasn't normal.
That wasn't normal. My mom, they told her she couldn't have kids. She tried for years to have a child, years. Her and my dad tried over and over. And miraculously, it was a miracle, really. I was a miracle child. By the time they got married in 1975, by the time I came, it was 1990. They had tried, she had cried. All she wanted was a baby. And she had tried everything, and it wouldn't work until one day she got a word from the Lord in a prayer moment that she had at her home at the time. And they told her she would have a child, and it would be a man child. And lo and behold, it was me. And so I became...
You are the Samuel, Hannah Samuel.
The Hannah Samuel. Yeah. Really, I got the story. Yeah. And I was her blessing, but I felt like her curse. Ooh. Because she used to look at me with eyes of love. She couldn't wait to love on me and to hug me and to ask me how my day was. But when that happened, the rejection was so deep that it took me a few years ago to really recover, and I'm still recovering from it, because you got to understand that I was already dealing with rejection at school. I was dealing with rejection in all of these spaces, from I can't play with these guys because I'm not masculine enough, or I can't be around these girls telling me I'm this. So it was just rejection. And then the moment my mom finds out where I could have gotten love, I got rejection. And I think that was probably the deepest rejection I probably ever faced, because the rejection from a parent it's way worse than what anybody else could do to you, because they're entrusted to speak life. They're entrusted to shape who you are, build a child, train a child up in the way that they should go, so that when they're older, they won't depart from it. Not say, you're not who you say you are, you're not my son. Who am I then? My child wouldn't do this. But I am. So now I think something is so wrong with me, because now my mother can't even look at me. So the enemy used that fear to deepen that wound of rejection, which all it did was just push me to want to go find comfort. So as a 16-year-old, as a 13, 14-year-old, I am now looking for comfort in the place that I was affirmed and wanted. And it was when I was in relations with the guys that I found that. My mom also told me, we will not tell your dad, because if your dad finds out, he's going to kill you and me both. So there was no chance for me to even tell my father. So now there is a root of fear, deeply rooted fear. I got rejection, I got trauma, and now I have a deep root of fear because of what my mom said about my dad. And my dad always loved me. He showed up to everything that I did. He has always been there for me in my life, even up until that moment. But when she said that, I was afraid to even let him see who I was, what I was doing, because I was afraid that he would harm us. And so out of fear, I hid even more.
So you're hiding from your dad. You're in a tension relationship with your mother. This is all middle school, going on to high school.
As much as we with our earthly fathers want to hide things, bad grades, bad reports, from school, bad, your mom telling on you because you did something in the house. As much as we fear and try to hide these things, and we can hide some things for extended periods of time, and probably some things that they'll never even find out. But one thing that we can't do is hide from the Heavenly Father. He sees everything, and even more so physically on what our actions are. He can see deep inside your soul. So he can see exactly what you're thinking. And so there's no hiding at all. And a lot of people think that they can hide from God or try to run away from God, but truly, you're not running anywhere. You're not hiding anything from the Heavenly Father, who sees everything. He knows everything. So I guess I pointed that out because he loves you anyway. Our earthly father may have some problems with what they find out, which was hidden in the dark. And don't get it twisted. The Lord doesn't like what we're doing in the dark. I'm not saying that it's okay. No. But guess what? We still are loved. And yet he still died for our sinful behavior because he loved us that much. And so because he did that for us, he wants us to come to him with all of our issues. Bring them to him and repent. Don't just, continue in that lifestyle or in that way of your doing or your being. You have to become who God created you to become. And so that's why we can come to the Lord, And that's why, even though we've done so many different things, the Lord is able to forgive us and we're able to repent here and now. And so that's the difference between our Heavenly Father versus our earthly Father. You can hide some stuff from our earthly Father, but you can't hide anything from our Heavenly Father. It's impossible. So I want to encourage somebody today and in this moment to bring whatever is in you that you've been doing that's against God, our Heavenly Father, for those who believe, and bring. He knows anyway. He wants you to be honest. He wants you to be honest and open. You can trust the one that died for you 100%.
How did you begin to seek for comfort, and how did that accelerate you in your life into that lifestyle?
That's a great question. Where you can't find love, acceptance, and security, you will find it. And so I did not find that in my home, so to speak. And it definitely wasn't at church, because if you lived a lifestyle that was homosexual, or you were out there doing any of that, it didn't matter if you was doing anything else.
Yeah.
Which is a problem. We'll get into that later. But, if you live in that life, you're going to hell. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're an abomination. Mm-hmm. So there was definitely, I was already thinking that the Lord's going to reject me, even at church. So the place where I thought I wanted to be, and I now felt like, oh man, God, I know he hates me. I'm an abomination. I'm messed up. Even though I feel called, there's no way I could do that work because of how they displayed him, how they portrayed him, how they taught him in that space. I grew up in a very Baptist church, and so that kind of explains a little bit of that background. So I found friends who also were like me.
Oh,
there was a community of people who were like me, who also were different, who also liked what I liked, and we discovered it together. And they accepted me. They loved me, and I felt safe around them. And we became some of the best of friends. And we shared things with each other about what we were doing and our affections and all the things, with each other. And it was okay there because we were the same. And it was in that place that I used to talk to them on the phone, and we all were considered feminine and girls. So we started acting like girls. We would talk on the phone like girls. And, we had these alter egos. Like, one was Beyonce, one was Kelly, one was Michelle. It was just kind of like the nature of like where we went. And we had fun doing it. We would get on chat lines and talk to guys and disguise ourselves. But we created this alter ego that actually matched how we felt. And I think that was also another seed. Because, those relationships went on, for a while. But my mom found out she had lung cancer when I was 16. And once she found out she had cancer, it wasn't but a short time. I want to say it was probably like a week or so after she was diagnosed with lung cancer that she died. And so I never got a chance to see that smile on her face again. I never got a chance to reconcile or even revisit the things of my past, just because cancer, took her life. And it was a very hard moment for me at 16 years old, because already I'm going through a lot internally. I have nowhere to process all the things. I'm acting out and doing all of this stuff. And then my mom, the one person that I love so much, because I was the only child, she passes away so quickly. And my dad, who was in the house also, he was having an affair with a lady he had been with for several years while he was with my mom. And because I think he couldn't deal with the pressures and the pain of my mom dying, because my mom did so much and he loved her and she loved him well, he left to go be with this woman. And I was at the house by myself, trying to process all of this and figure all of this out. So I was left in the house with all of this pain, with all of this confusion.
At 16.
At 16. And I had to continue going to school and continue going through life. But my whole world had turned upside down. How do you go from having a house with both parents, and even though it might have not been perfect because of the relational tension and stuff that I had, that be taken from you, and now, you have to sit and look at all of this. As a 16-year-old, I sat there and just knew my whole life was gone. And in all the pain that I was in that moment, Jesus. In that dark house, where I had a good family, to having feel like no family.
Wow.
At least in the house immediately. I had to sit there, and the person that pulled up next to me was the enemy.
Pulled up next to you.
He pulled up next to me, and he began to counsel me. Because where we won't step in as the church, or where we won't step in and help and be there and provide counsel and love and all the things that I needed in the moment, the enemy sat there and said, "This is what you do with that."
That's what the enemy does. The enemy will go after. Just like how the Bible describes, he goes around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. I think that's a very good metaphor for the enemy here, because you see, and just how lions behave. Just real quick, so we can kind of pull this attribute to see how this relates to how the enemy works. The enemy or lions, they go after the weaker prey or the one that's alone. And so in this situation, we see that he's alone. He has no one to turn to. The enemy is coming in like that lion, and is about to devour him. The enemy knows the opportunity, because they're keeping tabs, knows the opportunity, and is now pouncing on that opportunity because he's alone. He's into this thing that is destructive, essentially for his eternal life. The enemy's gonna bite on that and make sure he's locked in. And that's what we see the enemy is doing right now in this time and space of the story in his life. And so if you are in this situation currently where you can't turn to anybody, and your life is going crazy, the enemy is waiting and wanting for you to continue down a path of destruction. He wants you to do that. He doesn't want you to get help. He doesn't want you to find a group that will help you get on track, get back to where you need to be. No. He wants you to keep on going the way you're going, which is a downward hill. And so let this be an example of what not to do. Don't let the enemy use the traumas and the situation that you're in to convince you to go to a route that is essentially going to take your life to a place of destruction.
Volunteer.
Yeah, I got it.
Nobody else?
This.
Oh, you sure?
I'll take it. And maybe people tried to come around, but actually, as a matter of fact, I remember a pastor who was trusted that came when my mom was actually passed away at that moment. And he came over to the house, and he put his arms around me.
Oh, Jesus.
And he began to kiss my forehead. And I felt a sense of peace, because this is a pastor I used to sing at their church, and as a child in the youth choir. And this pastor kept kissing my forehead, and it went from feeling like I was being consoled and loved to now being touched and attacked. And I remember when his hand started to caress me and feel me, I remember pushing him and saying, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Get out of here. I hate you." And I told him I hated him because I needed to be loved. And that was a safe place for me, because church had always been, for the most part, because I loved it so much growing up as a child, even though I was afraid to show them my scars and be who I was there, I still felt like, it was a place that I can go. So this pastor, who always loved me and always spoke highly of me, always said I was anointed, came and did this to me. And it messed me up. And I remember he said, please, I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened to me. I didn't mean it. Don't tell anybody. And he ended up leaving the house. And there's another deep scar and that the enemy I know used. So I'm at the house at this time, and the enemy tells me, just go and do what you've been doing. And so I was leaving the house, and I was looking for love in all the wrong places. Thank God I still had my friends and all those things. And I just started partying. I started drinking. I started smoking. I started popping pills, ecstasy, at least like 4 times a week. I would start on like a Thursday and end on a Sunday. Would be high out of my mind, but anything I could do to escape the pain and the feeling that I was feeling. I had to get a job and work and take care of myself in that time, which I was able to manage at a bartending school, and I would work there part-time while I was going to school. But at night and stuff, I was partying. And I went to this house in my partying where I was exposed to these group of people who were basically just like me. It was a community of people who they all lived the lifestyle I was living. It was some girls, it was some men, and it was transgenders also that was there. And that was the first time I was exposed to transgenders, what I knew at that time.
What did it make you feel when you saw them?
It was like, this is something that I didn't know existed. But it looked like an opportunity. I didn't quite know that at the time, but it just looked like, because it's like, well, I always felt like I was feminine. I was always told that I was a girl. I always had this lean in this direction, and I was told to do what you see her do. And I met friends that, and we talk like women and we feel like girls now, and we have these conversations. And then I see this person who is living their life.
Watering the seed.
And I was like, watering the seed. This is real. And I love that person. And that person became a good friend of mine at the time. And I watched them do life. And they ended up kicking me out of the house because she kept saying, you're not like us. And I was so mad. I was like, what do you mean? She was like, I don't know what it is, but it's something about you. She told me, she said, it's just not like us. Wow. And I just don't think you belong here. She said, all we're doing is we're drinking, we're doing drugs, we're having sex, we're doing all these things. She said, but you're just not supposed to be here. She was like, you think you're a girl, but you're not.
She said that to you?
She told me that.
And wasn't she in their life? Yes,
she was a full-fledged transgender and partied with me for many days, called me girl, but one night she looked at me and said, you know what? Something's different about you. Out of everybody that I know that run around this house, you should not be here. And I was like, yes, I love this house and this and that. She's like, yeah, but I don't know. And so she said, tell me who you are. So I started bringing her through my life. And I was so high, I fell asleep that night. And after I got done telling her, she told me, well, just go to bed. We'll talk tomorrow. And the next morning is when she came over to me and she said, you don't belong here. I listened to everything you said last night, and it just sounds like that you're just in the wrong place. And you need to go to school like you're supposed to go to school and get out of this house. And she said, if you don't get out, I'm going to make you get out. And she was definitely forceful, if you knew who she was. And she was that serious about me not residing in that place and taking on that life. Because she said, I see you trying to be like us, but it's just not for you. But I was like, yes, it is. You don't understand. So she kicked me out of the house.
God was working early.
Bruh. And I wasn't trying to hear it. Because that was the only place, or the one place, where I felt that I was loved. I felt I was normal. I felt that I was secure and accepted. And I didn't want to leave that, you know.
Now I can see why you would want to lean more into that identity, because identity is reinforced in acceptance. I just saw that. And love, or what is perceived as love and acceptance. But go ahead.
So, to that point, I wanted more of that. So I leave, I go to school, go to college. Once I get in this college, I start to feel like, man, I want to change my life so bad. I kept thinking about her and I kept thinking about that. And I was like, you know what? Halloween, I'm going to dress up. And so my friends at the time dressed me up that night. They put makeup on me and hair and all the things. And when I looked in the mirror, I saw someone that was beautiful. And for the first time, I saw someone that I like to look at. And I was like, man, this is who I'm supposed to be. Everybody was like, oh my God, you are gorgeous. Look at you. And you are so real. And maybe you aren't a guy. Maybe you are supposed to be this.
What do you mean you were so real, though?
Real in that language meant like you look like a woman.
Oh, you look naturally.
I look naturally like a woman. They were just like, oh, you giving real, you know. And so that was the language. And when you hear that, like, you know that you got it, you know, if they tell you that, because most people, they don't tell that to you, you know. So in that moment, it was just, again, reinforcing that, you know, they were just saying words, but something was happening in my heart. I saw the life that I felt like I had been missing out on. Because now it makes sense. Now these things are aligning. And even though that was one night to them, it was, wow. It pushed me into a decision that I sat and I tossed and turned for several days. And I remember thinking about my life and thinking about the different things. And one of my friends who I told you I grew up with, they also had went and changed their life prior to that and had become a transgender. And I remember a trans woman, and I remember looking and, you know, and we had been friends talking about it. I was like, wow, that's so amazing. And so when I did it, I was like, maybe I'm supposed to transition too. It makes sense. Like, all of this makes sense now. And I did. I went and I threw away all of my clothes, and I bought new clothes, and I bought makeup, and I went back downstairs to those girls' house, and I said, do it again. And they did it again.
You weren't afraid to choose this, even though you've only known life as a male.
Wasn't afraid at all. I felt like it was my only option, because I was so angry, or I was so deeply hurt, and I just didn't really like Samuel. So much so that if it was a way to escape who I was, to finally become the person that maybe I'm supposed to be, then in the place where I'm accepted, the place where I'm getting this level of validation and all of these things, and I felt good. I finally liked myself. And when I looked in the mirror, I knew that I needed to do it. I had to do it, and there was no turning back. And my friends all were saying the same thing. They were like, you look amazing. This is it. We're willing to help you do it. And they did. And I went so far as to much as change my name. I went down to the courthouse in Tallahassee, and I went and I got my name changed from Samuel to Simone, because I was going to seal the deal.
Ooh. And
I went back to school and changed my name at the school and went back to classes. In that same semester where I showed up, you know, as a guy, but I showed up in my new identity, you know, and I lived, man. And
did you want to stun on them when you came back?
I did. I didn't care what they said, because I knew a lot of them knew, because they was like, wait a minute, well, you just here.
But how did they? Because that's the general public. These weren't your people.
Oh no,
no.
This was actually the school, like people that were attending campus.
And how did they
were
respond
students.
to
It was a lot of mixed responses. Obviously there were some people that were just like what, like this dude, and that kind of thing from the guys, and then they're very uncomfortable with it. And then you had girls who also were probably like, oh my gosh, but they were a little bit more inviting and a little bit more like affirming in a sense, like yes, like that's you, whatever. And so it was just like you dealt with it. But because I was around those people that I was in that house with for so long, they were tough as nails. And so I saw how they dealt with people who tried to treat them like that. So I already knew how to handle people like that. So I didn't let people try me, and I really ignored them because it didn't matter, because it's who I thought I was supposed to be. And so that just started this whole lifestyle at that time of just, I had to figure out how to keep this life up, because at that time it wasn't as accepted, and stuff as it is now, or at least jobs weren't readily available. It was harder to get at the time just because of how they looked at your license. You can have a different picture, but if you got that M on there, they was like, you know what? Actually, we already filled this position. It was kind of like that. So I saw the people that I was around live the life of escorting and prostitution, and they showed me how to basically like post ads, get money from guys without really having to do a lot of things with them. But really it was more so just to make money. And it was like, this is what we got to do. So you got to do this, and if you want to make money, you got to go and put your ads up and get these guys come over and get as much money as you can from them and kick them out, and it was kind of like that. So I learned how to do that, and that's what I started doing. Some people you had to do some things with, and every time I did those things, even though people would say I probably enjoyed sex because it was another guy or whatever, honestly, I didn't enjoy it. I was only doing it to make money. I wasn't doing it because I enjoyed it. It was just a way that I had to kind of provide for myself and to, continue to build this life that, I had. And so I began to escort, and I began to travel the world, and I made a lot of money. And because I was beautiful, I attracted a lot of people, and I did those things. And it seemed like no matter how much I did those things, though, it felt like there was still something that was missing. No matter how much money I had gotten, and no matter how many friends I had, or even relationships that I had, I still felt like there was just something missing. And so I, at that time, was changing. I was changing, man. What do they call it? I was changing degrees left and right because I was still in school.
Gotcha.
Because I was trying to, find a purpose that I could pursue. And what I know now that I didn't know then was the reason why I was so frustrated is because you can't put a purpose on an identity that's not yours. You can't. You can try, and we are gifted and wired in such a way that we can make great careers and we can become successful. But we were all born and created with a specific purpose that's assigned to our identity.
Yep, and that note right there, man, that's an important and that's a big one, because that's what's happening to a lot of those people that are transitioning, that are in the homosexual lifestyle. That's not how God created it to be. It's going against that grain, and especially in the transitioning part, which he is speaking on. Excuse me, just had to burp. Which he is speaking on, it doesn't match. It does not match. God has a purpose for his children's lives, and when we walk outside of that, we're never going to be fulfilled. It's never going to be a sense of fulfillment, and you're never going to be satisfied, because you are on a road of, or you are on the wrong road essentially. And that's why when we observe some of these celebrities, just let's bring that up, is you see a lot of them with a lot of money, with a lot of houses, land, and then you hear some of them talk about how they're just not fulfilled. You have Michael Jackson. He lived in the house apparently by himself. Like, why would he do that? Why was he unhappy? Why was he, why did he make those type of claims? Like, why are some of these rich people so empty? Why are they so unhappy? Even though we see them with all this luxury, all these possessions, why aren't they fulfilled? That's because you can't be fulfilled with gains. Gains is not going to fulfill your life's purpose. Your life's purpose is different from gaining materials. Gaining materials isn't supposed to be the purpose of your life. Rather, you're supposed to use the materials for the purpose of your life. Hey, I just gave myself a word, because a lot of times we think the purpose of life is to gain all these materials, to be on the top, to be the one with the biggest, the best. That's not going to accomplish your specific life's purpose, what God has given you to do. Basically, no matter what God has given you to do, what that's supposed to do essentially is affect people's lives. It's to service people. It's to use it for the world and service that. And that can look like many different things: doctor, lawyer, musician, help desk, evangelist. Like, it's many different ways we can service people, but essentially all that we do here on earth is to serve others. And when you look at the Ten Commandments, we have to love our neighbor as ourselves. So that is why material things can never satisfy us. That is why getting those, chasing that, will never be fulfilling, because that's not what we're created to attain. We're not created to attain something that we can grab. We're created for relationship. And so through service, that's the relationship that we have, and that's how we can connect with people and affect people's lives. I tell you what, nothing makes me feel better than knowing that I help somebody, whether it's opening a door, the smallest thing you can think of, like an old lady that really needed the door to be open. I just opened the door for her. It feels amazing to serve somebody like that. So, when you look at what God wants us to do, essentially, is to serve people through the things that He's given us. Of course, when you're outside of that, and now your physical identity, you're trying to manipulate yourself to look different from what God has given you. Of course, you're not gonna be fulfilled. Of course, you're not gonna feel right. All these lies that we see on social media and online, and it's telling people, no, if you feel like this, do it. If you want to do this, do it. We live in the age of do what you will. And there's a quote from the satanic, cults, is do what thou wilt, right? That's what this nation is pushing. Do what you want. Don't worry about tomorrow. Don't worry about your future. Do it now. What YOLO, only live, or you only live once? That's the mindset. They don't have the long-term mindset. We see how it's affecting people's lives now. They're making rash decisions. They're making things hasty based on what they feel. It's all about what we feel. It's not about anything that is truth or that is truthful. It's all about essentially lies. What the enemy wants to abuse you with here and make you believe in here is what's going to come out through here. But if you let God affect you, and if you hold on to the truth of God's word, you'll see your life change. And when that day comes, when we pass, you will be with the Lord. As simple as that.
In the package in which we came here as. And so there was frustration in my life because I was trying to be a nurse and I was trying to do these things that fit the woman that I was becoming.
Well, bro, you can't just gloss over that, because that is the argument, talking about assigning at birth. But if God assigns the gender congruently or simultaneously with purpose, then you could do a reassignment of gender, but there's no reassignment of
purpose. There's no reassignment of purpose, which is why I think partially why that there is a lot of suicide.
Oh my God.
There is a lot of still confusion even after. You're seeing people detransition even now because they're discovering that I'm just still feeling like there's something incomplete. There's something still missing. I look beautiful. I feel like everything aligns. All that was true, but there's still something that's missing. And for me, I felt many times like I wanted to commit suicide because it just wasn't lining up. It just wasn't working out. And I didn't like making money the way that I was making money, because that's not inherently who I am. I didn't want to rob people. I didn't want to take money from people. I didn't want to sleep with people to try to get hundreds of dollars or whatever it was. That's not what I wanted to do. And so all of that was beginning to do something so deep in me that made me feel like I didn't even want to be here. And I remember crying one time on my room floor, and one of my friends, at the time was my college roommate, was amazing. I remember he came over and he saw me go through the whole transition. I remember he said to me, he was like, if you're not happy, he's like, why don't you just, go back to the way you was, or, change it. And I got mad and I was like, don't tell me that. You don't understand. This is who I'm supposed to be. And I really felt like that. I want to make that very clear. I really felt like I had found who I was supposed to be. I just needed to try to find the purpose and the thing in which I could do that would make it all make sense. And I just couldn't find that. So there was this emptiness that I had, even though I had abundance, or what seemed like abundance on the outside, and with all the other things, there was still emptiness on the inside that only I knew. And that's the deception. People think because of what they see on the outward of a person that they are good and they are happy and they are satisfied. But I guarantee you, if you look deep enough, if you take time to ask the right questions, there's something that is missing if they don't know who they are and whose they are. It's just not possible for you to know that. It's not possible for you to feel okay, because nothing is going to satisfy. And so I kept working, kept going. And I remember one night, it's a very significant moment. I was working in Jacksonville, and while I was there, somebody came in the room to pay me for services. And when they came in, they put the money down on the table. And I remember at that time, I was like, okay, what is it that you want to do? And he looked at me and he said, I don't want to do anything. I just wanted to pay for your time. And I was like, well, this is a waste of time. You got more money because you messing up my money. You just want to sit in here and talk. I'm like, so what's up? And he's like, I just want to ask you a question. And I was like, what do you want? He said, how long are you going to go down this path to try to create this person that you've created? I was like, excuse me? Like, what are you talking about? This is who I am. I'm feeling disrespected. And he wasn't taken back by it. He knew, and he said, no, I'm serious. He said, I'm saying this because I care, and I want to ask the question. I just want to know, how long are you going to, try to keep becoming this person, that you're becoming? And I was like, this is who I am. So I don't know what you're saying, sir. You need to leave my room. I said, because I know who I am. He was like, well, no, you weren't born a woman, I know. He said, you were actually born a man. And he was going through the whole thing. I was like, all right, you're getting very disrespectful. He said, no, I'm not trying to. But he began to tell me, he was like, I know you've created this person. And I'm just saying, God still has a plan for you. And I was like, oh, man, I don't want to hear this. And I'm like, first of all, I felt like I was at the darkest place of my journey. And when I say dark, I just mean the depth of where I was in that point. I was so far gone and living in that life that honestly, I wasn't thinking about a call. I wasn't trying to think about the call. Actually, it was so far from me. I was living, right? I was living. And then this guy comes in and he's like, yeah, how long you going to keep becoming that? Because God still wants you. And so that was the first time I was kind of slapped in the face with it. And I remember looking at him and I was like, dude, first of all, this is who I am. I'm not going back to who I was. And I began to kind of like convince him that this is who I am, is who I'm supposed to be. And I was doing all the argument. And I remember he said in this conversation, he was like, so what's next for you? I was like, well, I'm getting ready to go get breast implants. I'd already scheduled it. I was getting ready to travel to go get the implants because I had made a decision that I wanted to get these implants because it was who I was going to be, and I wanted to complete everything. And I remember that I told him that, and he said to me, he was like, so you're about to get ready to go and get implants? And I said, yeah. I was like, because once I get those, I was like, God will leave me alone. I was like, so this whole purpose thing you're talking about, I was like, man, I was like, he's not going to want me anyway. What do you got to say to that? Like, I'll be an abomination. He will leave me alone. And this is who I'm going to be. And so this is what I'm going through with. And he laughed and he said, you're going to spend a lot of money, waste a lot of time, and use a lot of resources. He said, for you to still realize that that's still not going to stop God from coming after you. He loves you.
No.
And he is still going to come after you. No matter how much you change yourself, it will not stop him. And it's like the room, something happened in the room, but I remember being like, I don't want to hear this. And I remember I made him leave and I kicked him out. And I tossed and turned, but I was like, nah, this ain't happening. Like, this is who I am. Jesus. And I'm going to go all the way through with it. There were many moments along after that people would say to me randomly, it would be every so many months, they'd be like, God, there's just something special about you. There's something different about you. I don't care where I would be walking in the mall, fully who I was, and they would still stop me.
They could discern it.
Discern it.
Natural discernment.
Bruh, I would be in a group of people getting ready to go shop, and it would be me that somebody would say, you're so beautiful. God loves you. And it was always God. It was always God. It was not just a compliment, but it was always a God that was saying these things to me. And I did not really want to hear it because that's not who I was anymore. And I was trying to block it out, but it's like he continually kept trying to send signs to remind me that he still wanted me no matter where I was in life, no matter what I had done to myself. He kept showing up. He would show up in the mall. He'd show up in the grocery store. He'd show up in my room. He'd show up in a group of friends. He'd show up at the club. And it would just be this pull that that he still had love for me, but I was still blocking that out. And so I went and got the implants. I wish I can say that was enough, but it didn't, because I was who I was supposed to be in my mind. And so I went to Mexico. I got the implants.
Wait, weren't you afraid? Like, they say that overseas when you go and do that stuff, it's kind of dangerous. Were you just that committed to?
Oh, absolutely. That was who I was. And so there was no fear that would stop me, from making that change. The only fear that I had was the fear of getting the full surgery done, not just the implants, but also going through the castration. Yeah, where basically
The whole
oh yeah, basically what they do in castration for the most part, as far as I know, because I didn't go through it, but they would basically remove the testicles and stuff, so you will stop producing testosterone,
yeah.
whatnot.
Oh, wow.
And so I wanted to have both surgeries done at once so I could produce more hormones. I was on hormone therapy. I was doing it all. I was taking the hormone pills, and I was getting off the market, all those things. And I was becoming more feminine, but I wanted to make sure I sped up the process. And if that was going to help me, I was like, bet.
Yeah.
But when I went to go do the surgery, the doctor actually said, I can't do both of them at the same time. He said, I would, but I can't. He said, because it is very life-changing. And he said, and I know you want to pay for it, and I know you can pay for it. He
He
said,
rejected the money.
he rejected the money. And I was like, but I want to get this done. And he said, no, how about this? How about you get the implants first? He said, and after you've healed and all of that, he was like, if you still feel like you want to have the other surgery, just come back. He said, but it's a big change at one time. And he was like, and I just don't feel comfortable with doing both at once. Now I'm going to Mexico and I'm paying, good money for this. But he told me that. And it was in that moment that I realized, like, okay, well, I'm not going to get that. I'm going to forego that. And that I was a little nervous about, because I knew that meant like, oh, yeah, it's changed. But I had no other choice, because the doctor wouldn't do it. So I went and got the implants, came back, and it felt like money went up.
You mean the price went up?
Price went up. Yeah, because now I'm like, I already looked real, and I was beautiful, as they say, but now I have the implants. Now I have the whole package. And so I was really starting to make money and travel and do all the things. But even in all of that, again, I still felt like something was missing. I had all the friends, I had the relationships, I had all the things, and I just felt like something was missing. So I cried out to God one night. I began to pray, and I said, Lord, I was like, I don't know what to do. I've tried to, change my degrees, and I want to do this, I want to do that. And I said, but I just want to try to find, what I'm supposed to be doing.
Jesus.
And the Lord only said 2 words: go home.
Oh.
And so he told me to go home. And I was like, no, I'm not going home. And I remember, because I wasn't listening to his instruction, I just kept going in the way that I was going. And, just to put a pin in that, one thing I tell people is that when you ask God to help you, to heal you, to free you, to direct you, he's committed to that, because he wants you to be in alignment with his will for your life. So when I started asking God to help me figure out what I'm supposed to do, he spoke. And God always speaks to us when we ask him that question, but a lot of times we don't like what he's saying to us. We reject the instruction, and the healing, the deliverance, the purpose, the alignment is on the other side of the instruction. I did not know that. I didn't want to do that. It didn't matter, because I wasn't going to do that. I wasn't going home, wasn't going back in a sense, So I kept going. And I would run into these walls where I just felt the same feeling again, happy on the outside, and things were going well. It wasn't that I was out here depressed. Like things were going well, and I was having fun. Like I was living the dream in a sense.
Yeah.
Feeling good, had good relationships, and had what I wanted at the snap of my fingers.
Jesus.
But what was happening on the inside kept bothering me. And so again, I asked the question, God, I don't know what to do, and a couple months later, I'm talking to him again, and he says the same thing: go home. because you can't go past the last place you tell God no.
Hey, do I have something to throw? I need something to throw. You can't what?
You can't go past the last place you tell God no. We always want a new set of instructions, or we want him to do something new, or we want him to say something else. And I don't care if it's been a few days, a few months, a few years. You may look like you're moving, but you may not really be going nowhere. Not in the direction in which he will have for you, because he has an instruction, a specific instruction for our lives that he's committed to. He's like, you got to say yes to this in order for me to do that. Wow. And because he loves us, he doesn't change the last thing he said, because he knows the way that I take. He knows what's best for me. So I hear him say, go home. I finally say, okay, I'm going to go home. I get enough money to go home. And when I go home, I went to stay with my godmom, but I had my own instructions. I was like, listen, I want to stay with you, and I'm only going to be here for a short period of time. I'm going to move to Atlanta. That's what I said at the time. I was like, and I thought I was going to go and become like a porn star and get out of the business of like escorting.
Yeah.
You know, I never prostituted like on the streets, but I made a lot of money in like ads and stuff. But I said, I want to get out of that dangerous work, you know, in a sense, and kind of be a little bit more professional, I guess. And so I knew that was the next plan. So I started to, you know, say, okay, I'll go home, but on my terms. Well, in the process of doing that, the pastor, who I call a spiritual mom now, who I love so much at this church, at the time was called Fresh Wind Ministries in Fort Myers. God woke her up in the middle of the night, or that morning, and said that there was going to be a supernatural miracle or healing that was going to take place in service. And she felt it all morning long. And so she texted all her leaders and she said, invite somebody to go to church with you today, to come to church, because God is going to do something supernatural. And my godmom at the time was one of the leaders.
Oh my.
And they didn't have church until 5:00 in the afternoon. So, you know, she told me, she was like, hey, you got to go to church with me. And I was like, I don't want to go to church. Like, I'm not going to go to church. I had been to churches when I was in Tallahassee, but they were churches that were, you know, very much kind of like affirming, or at least they didn't really preach the gospel. They didn't really preach, you know, those things. It was pretty much like encouraging and whatnot. Yep. So I was going a lot, but this was a different type of church. And I kind of knew what I was going into, but I also was like, I don't really want to, you know, go there. Yeah. So I told her, I was like, no. She was like, well, if you're going to be in this house, you got to go to church, and you just come to church. And I was like, all right, you know, I'll go. Yeah. And so I went to church that afternoon, and I remember I got myself together. You know, I was going in there just as I was. I mean, at that point, I had no other choice who I was. I had long hair, you know, and my 6-inch heels, and I went. I was like, you know, going to church. Okay, I'm going as I am, so y'all gonna have to accept me. I kind of had a feeling that I was probably gonna be judged and stuff because I was from Fort Myers, so I kind of felt like people know me, you know, whatever. And as soon as I get there, there's literally this guy standing at the door who was married to a good sister of mine. Okay. And I knew he hated transgenders. Ooh. I knew he hated homosexuals. I mean hate. But he was an usher. But he was very clear. Many times I came home that I was not invited to the house and all those things. But my beautiful sister, she didn't care what he said. She still let me come around, and she was so instrumental in that time. But I saw him at the door. And I remember when I walked in, I walked past him, and I was like, here we go. And I walked past him, and he said, hey, come here. And I was like, me? He was like, yeah. And I was like, you know, what this about? And so I walk over, I'm like, here we go. And he's like, I want you to know I love you. And he said, and I'm sorry if I made you feel otherwise. And he said, but don't ever walk past me when you come into these doors and not love on me. And he said, come here. And he hugged me. And when he hugged me, I felt like he disarmed me. Wow. Because the love that I felt in that moment, I didn't expect to feel. And it was very much real. And it was in that love connection that I felt like the walls that I had up of even going in there actually came down.
There's a part two. There's a part two to that. Let me know down in the comments if you want me to do a part two. But hey, listen, this is good news. This is good news. A lot of people need to hear this. A lot of people need to see these examples and hear the message that God can do what you think he can't do. You know, there's a lot of people coming out or transitioning and things of that nature. You know, a lot of those stories are not shown. And to see some stories that are shown is very encouraging for people who need to hear it and who need to come out of that lifestyle. Don't know what to do, don't know where to turn to Christ. And you will definitely get, and you will definitely be received. You receive that help that you need through ones who do love God and who do follow Christ. You know, they will show you that love. But not everybody that says they're Christian will, you know, is actually doing Christian things. So that's what one thing I want to, you know, say, because a lot of people blame their Christianity or why they aren't Christian based on how others act. And there's a lot of pretenders out there. So we need to understand that everywhere you go, there's a pretender in every sector of life, business, whatever, entertainment. There's people that's going to say they are one thing, but they're not. Do not categorize everybody based on certain interactions. That's what I'll say. But if you want me to do a part two, drop it down in the comments below and let me know. I will definitely be happy to finish this, because this is like I said, it's an important thing, and we need to be praying for people to come to realize that they're going down a path that is destructive, and we need to pray for their salvation as well. So help me in that, and let's do that together as believers in the body. Thank you guys for watching. It's Conscious Thinking with EddyEd. Catch you guys next episode. Peace.